what's up guys, and welcome back to MOV Plus. I hope you're all keeping well out there. Our workout today is going to have 3 sections to it. So the first part is going to be the warm-up as usual, guys. We're going to just take some time to get the joints and the muscles nice and loose, get the heart rate up. From there, we're going to go into the build section, which will be 10 minutes working with some suitcase deadlifts and some floor press. From there, we're going to go into the move workout, which is going to be a 15-minute section, and we're going to see some push press, hang power cleans, and some weighted sit-ups. Once that's done, we'll finish off with a little bit of mobility just to loosen the body up to finish. Now, as for now, we're going to get into that warm-up, guys. So the first part of this is going to be 2 minutes of cardio of your choice. Now, we're going to do 2 movements that we're going to go back and forth between for that 2-minute block. So the first one is a plate grounder overhead. So with a nice light plate, we're going to go from the floor up to lockout, keeping the back nice and straight. Once we've done 10 of those, we're going to come down into a push-up position or a bear crawl position, and we're going to basically do leg through, so doing a sit through movement for 10 reps on that one, going back and forth, keeping that midsection nice and tight. Now, once the first 2 minutes are up, we're going to go into the next 3 minutes where each minute you'll go 10 up downs. So that's jumping out to push-up position and back to standing, and whatever's left in the minute, you'll do as many sit-ups as you can. So either with or without the ab mat, going from laying down to sitting up, and you'll just do that for the remainder of each of those 60-second blocks. Good to go, Matty? Yep. All right, starting in 10. So 2 minutes of cardio of your choice, guys. You can do what we're doing, or you can pick your own thing. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So I mentioned before, guys, that it is a light plate. Now that is deliberate. We want to think about a weight that just enables us to jump straight into it. This is the warm-up, so this will be the first thing you do going into training. So you want to make sure it's not something big and bulky where you've got to warm up before you start doing that. This should be nice and easy. So it's really just more something to hang on to. It doesn't have to have too much weight to it. And it's just enabling us to get that nice strong lockout overhead and that touch on the floor. So once we hit 10, we're going to move to the sit-throughs for 10. So this is a bit of a test of balance, coordination, a little bit of flexibility as well, being able to shoot that leg through. You'll notice that Matty's just kind of taking his time, keeping it nice and stable, not rushing it. So definitely recommend taking it slow if you haven't done this one before, because it can be a little bit of a challenge. One of the things that Matty's doing really well, if you watch his feet, is the foot that has all of his weight on it is going to pivot. So he doesn't lock it straight into the ground. He's going to allow it to turn a little bit as he goes through that movement. Okay, so 1 more minute on this. You should be able to maybe get 1 more round. Now, there's kind of 2 different plate positions, guys. At the bottom, the plate is going to be vertical, so it's pointing straight up, straight down as he tags the ground. So you'll notice the thumbs will point down towards the floor. At the top, it's going to be horizontal, so he's going to flatten it out as if he's holding up a dinner plate over his head, knuckles to the roof. Nice. All right, we'll see if we can sneak in 1 more set of the sit-throughs. So again, we're going to see that foot pivot as he shifts his weight onto it. The hand will stay where it is, but obviously there's a fair bit of movement at the shoulder. So you want to stay nice and stable there. Keep things locked in place. You want to get a nice full leg extension out. You might even have a slight contact of the side of your butt to the ground, but that's optional. All right, 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So 10 up downs now. So we're in the second section of this warm up. This will be for the next 3 minutes. We start each of those minutes with 10 up downs. So you'll see there's basically 2 important positions with this. One is the stand up at the top. So getting everything stacked on top of each other, hips wide open. And then the other important position is at the bottom. We're jumping the feet out, again, creating a nice straight line. Once he clears 10 of those, we're going to go into as many sit-ups as we have time for in the remaining time of the minute. So about 25 seconds left. We should be able to get a handful of reps out. Now he's butterflying those knees out, guys. This just allows for a nice smooth movement. Also allows for the abs to do the majority of the work rather than the hip flexors getting overly involved. Be tagging the ground at the back and then tagging the toes at the top. All right, 3, 2, 1, and back into the up downs. So hands will be about shoulder width or just slightly wider. And we want nice locked out elbows, nice active shoulders as you move through this. Stance is going to kind of pinch or close up at the back, so it goes nice and narrow into that gymnastic push-up position. and then it's going to split wide at the top to allow for a nice high hip hinge as we come up out of it. Nice. Okay, so a very consistent time there, which is good. Move through the sit-ups again. Now, one thing I want you to take notice of is at his midsection, when he hits right at the back there as his fingertips touch the ground, he's letting that rib cage flare up. So he's getting a nice kind of arch over the pad, stretching out those abs, and then snaps close with that arm swing. Okay, and 3, 2, 1, and one more time through. So last minute of the warm-up. Notice how Matty kind of hits the brakes when he hits the bottom there. He's not letting the hips sag through. He's going for a nice, strong push-up position. All right, so last 20 seconds. Going to keep the hips nice and still in the one spot, guys, so rather than letting it lift and kind of seesawing over the pad. 10 more seconds. And done. All right, so that is the warm-up done, guys. Have a little bit of recovery time. We're going to check out build next. Alrighty, guys, so we're going to have a look at the build workout now. This one is 10 minutes long. Basically, we have 5 2-minute blocks we're going to work through. In each of those blocks, we're going to go through 10 reps on right and left on a single dumbbell suitcase deadlift. So Maddie's going to set up with the dumbbell on one side. Okay, nice straight back, tagging the ground, and then standing up tall. He'll do 10 on one side, 10 on the other. Once he's completed that, he's going to move down to the floor into a single dumbbell floor press. Now this one's going to be both arms, but still single dumbbell, as opposed to the single-sided one we just did. So laying flat there and then just pressing up to lockout, very similar to like a bench press. So when you go through this, guys, it's a 2-minute block, so we're hopefully going to get the work done in, say, minute 15, minute 30, thereabouts, and then you've got the rest of that 2-minute block to rest. We're doing that 5 rounds. Good to go? All right, starting in 10. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So with this single-sided deadlift, guys, this suitcase deadlift, let's start off with the stance setup, right? It's quite narrow. Going to be a gap between the feet and the same gap between the knees. We want to make sure that they're not collapsing in on each other. Now, although this is single-sided, guys, we want to pay a lot of attention to keeping squared up. So the best way to do this is to actually pretend like you have a dumbbell in the other hand and just mimic the same movement. Now, the core is still going to do all the bracing because the weight is on one side, but at least we're going to have the shoulders and the hips and the knees all paired up nicely so that we're not falling into the trap of rotating and getting onto an awful angle as we come down. So looking for 10 and 10. And then we're going to hit 15 on the floor press. All right, so moving down. All right, so going into 15 floor press, guys, let's look at the setup. We've got head, shoulders, hips, and feet all glued to the ground. We don't want any of those things to lift off. We also want to pay attention to trying to push our shoulder blades back into the floor. So if you feel your chest kind of lift up, you feel that low back just get a little bit of natural arch to it. That's a good thing. It means we're kind of getting those shoulders in the right spot. From there, we're going to extend those arms up to lockout. So notice Matty's got just a nice controlled pace on this. He's not rushing through it. He's even taking the time to put a little pause top and bottom, which is always good for control. Okay, so Matty's right on task with the time there. We've got 30 seconds rest till the next one. That's 1 round of 5, so there's 4 to go. Okay, 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So into this second round, guys, as we move through these deadlifts, let's have a look at the shin positioning. So Matty's going to kind of work as hard as he can to keep the shins mostly vertical. Now, this being a dumbbell as opposed to a barbell and plates does mean we generally have to go an inch or two deeper. So if you have the flexibility, we're going to go front end of the dumbbell to the floor. If you find that going to that point pulls you out of position, so we have a very dramatic knee collapse forwards, we have the back rounding, we have the body kind of twisting, come up a little bit. Maddie might just go to like the top of where his socks are or something like that. That allows him to keep everything nice and square. But we're still working for that nice hip hinge the same way we would see any deadlift with any weighted implement. All right, moving back into the floor press. All right, so we're going to see that same lock-in of the shoulder blades. You'll notice that the whole time, Maddie's forearms stay pretty much vertical, right? So we're keeping them stacked under the weight itself, which means that at the top of the movement, it's going to be hovering kind of mid to high chest, so level with his shoulders. As it comes down, however, it's going to kind of be sort of low sternum. So there's going to be a slight little kind of arc motion. It's not going to be a dead straight line. And that way we just keep the arms in the best position. We're not having that dumbbell kind of fold back just to stay in line with the shoulders. We want to bring it down a little bit, keep that vertical forearm. Ten seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. Now the main muscles driving this deadlift movement, guys, is going to be your hamstrings, your glutes, your low back. But what we're going to see with this single-sided approach, so we've got all the weight on one side of the body, is that that midsection is going to have to work a lot harder. So all the muscles around the hips, glutes, back, everything through there, your obliques, are all going to have to work as a team to keep everything locked in place. When you do it, you want to be very deliberate in thinking about that musculature. So think about hamstrings, glutes tensing as you stand up. Think about your abs bracing as you move through that movement so you're not getting twisted out of shape and you're not rounding your back. All right, so moving into the floor press for 15 again. This one obviously is now an upper body movement as opposed to a lower body movement. So we're going to see the pecs, shoulders, triceps doing all that pressing motion. That being said, that activation of the shoulder blades is going to get the entire upper back to be working as well. So although this is a kind of a front of body, a pressing movement, we're going to get a lot of engagement through that upper back as well. So if you've only got the option for something fairly light at home, guys, slow it down, go with more of a tempo, use up the whole 2 minutes so you can almost run one round into the next, make it more challenging that way. So that's 3 rounds down, we've got 2 to go. Kick in at the 6-minute marker for the next one. Ten seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go. Now, this is an important movement to do, guys, just for real life functionality. We're not generally going to be picking things up that are perfectly balanced and nice and even and nice and convenient like a barbell. So it is good to work with stuff that's a little bit kind of lopsided or a little bit odd, just so it kind of reflects real life. You want to make sure the body has the ability to handle stuff if it's not just beautifully presented in an optimal situation. Make sure you have the ability to brace and correct for those things that aren't even. So as you move through this, guys, you want to keep that chest in the lower part of your field of view. You want to make sure you can always see that sticking out. If you feel like it's very much out of view and you can see your shoulders kind of rounding in, generally means those scaps have released, which is not a good position to be in. You want to make sure you're pushing back, keeping that chest nice and high. So it's like it's raising to meet the dumbbell. Nice. Right on track with the time again, that's good, nice and consistent. We're gonna go one more round. Ten seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go. So last round of this one, guys, make sure you're just checking in all those technique pointers as you go. So same gap between the feet and the knees. Make sure we're not collapsing forwards or inwards. Make sure that the shoulders are staying nice and square so we're not twisting, we're not rounding over or anything like that. Remember to make that adjustment with the dumbbell. If you don't feel like you can get to the ground touch with good positioning, come up a little bit. It's more important that everything's in a good spot rather than us actually having to touch the floor. Notice as well, Matty's head stays nice and neutral as he goes through this. He's not craning the head back as he comes down. It's actually just staying pretty much fixed with the rest of him as he moves. All right, last set of the floor press, so 15 reps. If you happen to be doing this with a kettlebell, guys, sometimes that can be a little awkward if you want to try and do that single hold. You have the handle on one side and the round part on the other. You can actually kind of turn it so it's lined up with you and grab onto the horns, press that way. Or if you want to, you can go 15 single side press, 15 single side press, depending on if the weight's appropriate. You can do that as a backup plan if that works a little better. So that was our last round, guys. We've got about 20 or so seconds left on the clock, so we'll let that run out and then we'll push on to the move workout. Last 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and done. All right, so that is the build workout done, guys. We're gonna push on to move next. Alrighty, guys, we're gonna have a look at the move workout now. This one is 15 minutes long, and we're looking at 5 3-minute blocks. What's gonna happen in each of those blocks is we're gonna do 16 reps on a single dumbbell push press. So that's gonna look like this. So one dumbbell, both hands at the heads there, dipping and driving up. We'll do 16 reps on that one. That then rolls into 16 alternating hang power cleans. So we're gonna swing between the legs to shoulder and then changing hands on the way down. Go back and forth on that for 16 reps. We then bring it down to the ground and go into weighted sit-ups for 16. So that will be with our weight up by the collarbones there, going through that sit-up motion. So you go through all 3 of those movements. You've got a 3-minute window to get it done. So hopefully we see it done in maybe around the 2-minute marker, maybe a little, 2:15, something like that. Give yourself a little bit of break between them. We're doing that for 5 cycles. Good to go? Good to go. All right, starting in 10. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So first up, guys, we've got that single dumbbell push press. So working with one dumbbell but both hands. So you're grabbing onto the heads at either side. It's a dip drive motion. So with this one, although it is primarily an upper body movement, we want the whole body to do the work. So we want to think about those legs and hips creating some good upward momentum. That's going to then carry through to the arms pressing out the finish. So if we look at the positioning, stance is probably about hip to shoulder width wide. So you can have the toes slightly turned out a little bit if you want to, or straight is fine. Key thing here, if we look at his knees, when he dips and drives, the knees are kind of slightly forward and slightly outwards. So it's not like a deadlift or a squat where we would push the butt back first. There's actually a lot of knee dominance in that movement. As we move into the hang power clean, you notice this one's alternating now. So it's a single dumbbell, but it's one-sided and it goes right to left as you go. So 16 reps will be 8 right, 8 left. And again, we're using that similar kind of principle of the lower body creating the momentum, the upper body finishing the movement off and moving the dumbbell from point A to point B. Nice, Maddie. Okay, so moving to the weighted sit-ups now. So we're looking on pretty good time frame there. Going to bring the weight up to the collarbones. Now, it's really important when you do this, guys, only use a weight if you can do this with good form, and you can, for the majority of this, do 16 unbroken, at least for the first couple of rounds. It doesn't have to be unbroken the whole way, but if you are having to break it up right from the beginning, breaking it up multiple times, just put the dumbbell off to the side and just do it more of a strict sit-up. So hands across the chest, no momentum swing with the arms. It's really important that if you are using the dumbbell, you want to keep it close to your collarbones. The temptation when we do a weighted sit-up is that we push the weight forward, and that actually acts as a bit of a counterbalance and lifts us out of it. So it makes it easier, which we don't want. We want it to be challenging. So you can see how Maddie's got it pinned in there, just kind of under his chin against his collarbones, and that way his body's got to lift the weight of that dumbbell. Beautifully timed, Maddie. Perfection as always. So that's one cycle down, guys. We've got 4 to go. We'll be going at the 3-minute mark for the next one. So we've got a little bit of rest time here, and then we'll swing back around to those push presses. Ten seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. Okay, so into this push press again. So we talked about the stance, talked about the knee positioning. So look at the torso now. It's bolt upright the whole time. So we're thinking about the hips being stacked under the shoulders, which allows us to really put a lot of upwards drive on that dumbbell. We don't want to be leaning or slouching to create that dip drive. Once that momentum's there, it's going to transition into the shrug, which is going to kind of start to lift the dumbbell. By the time the dumbbell is above head height, that's when the arms are really going to kick in, and it's honestly just to finish it off. You should have created the majority of the work through the lower body. The arms will just continue that momentum into that nice lockout. You can see his head gets between the arms at the peak there. All right, moving to the alternating hang power clean. So the name hang power clean, guys, you've got to take notice of that hang word. That means it's got to stay above knee height. Okay, it's not a full clean where we would go to the ground, and it's also not a squat clean, so it's a hang power clean. The power part means that we're going to catch in a quarter or a half squat, so it's above parallel with the legs. It's a nice aggressive little snap underneath, so you can see that hand kind of staying nice and tight in that neutral position or hammer position, flicking up to that front rack, and he's making a point of standing up tall every single time. This can be one of the common flaws with hang power cleans, that people will drop it off early just to move it quicker. We want to make sure we're hitting that end point. Right, so into the sit-ups. Okay, now we did some sit-ups in the warm-up, guys, so hopefully you kind of got the movement down, but just to kind of refresh, we want to make sure that your butt stays stuck to the one spot on the ground. We don't want to feel like it's lifting and then slamming back down. You're going to end up getting a really sore tailbone doing that. We also want to try to allow that spine to move in a way that like the lower body is going to be kind of stuck down and the upper body is going to move independent of that. So we've got that nice extension. Now usually we would touch the ground at the back with our fingertips for a sit-up. Now, because we've got those hands in on the weight, we're going to touch our shoulders and possibly our head as well to the ground. Nice work, Maddie. Good. Right, so a similar sort of time frame there. About another 30 seconds rest, and we'll hit up the next one at the 6-minute mark. So that's 2 rounds done of 5. 10 seconds. 3, 2, 1, and go for it. Now, I mentioned in the build section, guys, we talked about if you're working with a kettlebell at home, sometimes that can be a little trickier to work with for this single dumbbell or single kettlebell setup. You definitely can do it. I would suggest inverting the kettlebell so that the ball part faces back to you and you can grab onto the horns underneath. Push press in that sense. That's an easy way to do it with the grip wise. You can also go single side. So work with 8 on one side, 8 on the other, or if you have a really light kettlebell, 16 and 16. Generally, if you're working with a loaded backpack, guys, that's a fairly easy setup to be able to grab either end of that, work the same movement as Maddie was doing there. Now you notice Maddie will transition the dumbbell to his other hand at about kind of mid-torso height. So he's making sure he's got it in the other hand, clear to go before it hits the bottom. Sometimes we see people trying to change and they're changing hands at the bottom where all the speed and all the deceleration is coming to a head at the bottom. We want to make sure that the other hand has it so you can catch that swing and move to the next rep. So moving to the weighted sit-up. So now being in round 3, guys, the fatigue's going to start to settle in with this one. You'll probably find if you're working with the one weight like Maddie is, this will be the one that feels the most difficult. So it may get to a point where you have to break it up a little bit. That's okay. But remember, we want to try to stay on that 3-minute cycle. So if you do kind of cap out, I guess, you're still going on the sit-ups by the time the end of that 3 minutes comes, just jump straight back on the push press again, see if you can catch up in the next round, that sort of thing. But don't spill over into the next one because you'll end up just getting further and further behind. So get as far as you can. Hopefully you can hang on and get all the rounds done. But if you do tap out with the time, just switch back onto the push presses and continue with the next round. All right, nicely done, Maddie. So that's 3 cycles done. We've got 2 to go. Three, 2, 1, and go for it. I like the fact that Maddie's putting that little pause at the top there. Very easy, especially when we're doing a single dumbbell. It's actually quite a narrow position to work with. It's a little bit more demanding on the shoulder mobility. It's very easy to start kind of bouncing out of the top and not actually hitting that really nice end range. So he's put that little pause there just to establish good control and make sure that his head is just slightly popping through. So he's lining up the ears with the biceps. All right, hang power cleans. So we can see that hip hinge. It's a nice straight back as he leans over, so he's not just rounding and then just wrenching it up to his shoulder. He's actually kind of making a point of like pushing the hips back, softening the knees a little bit, getting that good stretch on the rear chain, and then snapping up aggressively. You even notice that the heels will kind of pop up off the ground just a little bit. That's that nice triple extension. He's creating all that nice momentum on the dumbbell. That transitions to the shrug like we talked about with the push press. It transitions from the legs to the upper body. And then once that momentum is there, it's that nice quick little flick underneath, relocates into that front rack position. All right, so Going into the sit-ups. So along the way, as the natural effect of fatigue kicks in, you'll see that that dumbbell in Maddie's hands is gonna wanna kind of reach forward, right? It's that body being clever and trying to get a little bit of easier movement, trying to throw that dumbbell forward. Maddie's doing a really good job though of just pinning it in there and making sure it's not getting away from him. He's making the abs do the work, as opposed to taking the easy route of just letting that dumbbell go forward and almost lifting him out of that sit-up. Now the last round we talked about, if you end up tapping out with the time frame, so you go past the 3-minute time frame, you might find it's a good time to take the dumbbell out of the equation and just do body weight sit-ups. If that allows us to stay on time frame, that's cool. Hopefully we can just kind of grind it out, soldier through those last few sets. All right, that's the 4th one down. We've got 1 to go. Okay, 10 seconds. And 3, 2, 1, and go for it. So 5th and final round. So back on the push presses again. And we want to make sure it is a push press as well, guys. For those of you who are a little bit more at the advanced end of things, you will have done push jerks before. You know that that's a even more efficient movement for moving weight. We want to make sure we're not slipping into the mode of doing that. We want to develop the ability to just muscle the weight out and have that kind of semi-strict kind of a press. Obviously it's not fully strict, but you want to feel like you've got tension from bottom to top rather than that feeling of snapping underneath and dropping under with the jerk motion. All right, into the hang power cleans. So if you haven't done this movement much, guys, or you haven't done much sort of single-sided stuff where you've got to change from right to left, it can be a little bit tricky getting the hands right. So take your time in the first few rounds. Or now, if the fatigue is kicking in and you feel like you're getting a little bit loose, maybe the hands are getting a bit sweaty, just slow it down. Have that hand, that second hand open and ready so you've got a nice landing pad. And let go of that dumbbell into the other one and move through those reps. So sometimes with alternating dumbbell movements, we can change on the ground. This one being a hang one, that's not the case today. So we're just gonna make sure we take the time to learn that hand switch. All right, last set of the sit-ups. So again, we get that nice tight position with the weight. Always be looking for the shoulders and possibly the head to contact the ground. Obviously not hard, we don't want to clunk your head on the floor. Maddie's doing this on some nice rubber matting, which is always good, kind of gives you a soft setup, especially on the tailbone as well. If we're doing a lot of reps of this, adds up on friction on the ground, so always good to have a little bit of a soft setup underneath the tailbone there. Now again, we can see that that dumbbell wants to go forward. If Maddie just kind of let his form fly out the window, I'm sure he'd reach it right out in front. He's not doing that. He's doing a really solid job of keeping it in close. The abs are having to do the work. Nice, Maddie, doing well. Good job. All right, so that's the last one. We've got 30 seconds left on the clock there. If you're still going, that's totally fine. We'll run this clock out, and then that will be the end of the move workout. Last 10 seconds. And that is time. All right, so that's the move workout done, guys. We're just gonna finish things off in a moment with a little bit of cool down stretching. Alrighty guys, now that all the hard stuff is done, we're just gonna slow things down with a little bit of stretching. So the first drill we're gonna do is a scorpion tail. So this one we're gonna be laying on our front. We're gonna do this for the next minute. So arms out in a T shape, and then we're gonna bring the opposite leg across Okay, and then we're just going to go back and forth. So you notice Maddie will put about a 3 to 5 second pause at end range there. Now, this is a really nice one because it allows us to hit a few different spots at once. So at the top end of things, we've got the shoulder, bicep, kind of chest area, that sort of thing. And then down low, we've got the hip flex. You might even get a little bit of quad as well. You can get that knee into a nice big deep bend. We also get a little bit of rotation through that midsection. So there's a lot of good things going on there. I like that Matty is really exaggerating the leg movement over the top to the point where he's almost rolling to face the roof. So we're not going to touch the opposite hand, but we're going to kind of move in that direction with that foot and use the other hand, the spare hand, to kind of push and lever off the ground as much as we can. Get that really nice stretch. All right, from there, we're going to move into a seated shoulder stretch. So we're going to go feet out in front, hands as close as we can get them behind us. Okay, so from there, if you can, you're going to shuffle the hips forward a little bit, open up on that shoulder angle. We'll do this for a minute as well. Now, over time, the goal is to get your pinkies to touch behind you. That's not necessarily going to happen immediately, but it's something to work towards. And once you do have that, you can start to shift the hips further and further, creating more and more stretch on the shoulders. So really important when you do this one, guys, don't let the shoulders slump and roll internally to get them back further. You're gonna make sure that the shoulders pull back. We get really, really wide across the chest there. Big breaths in, trying to expand through the shoulders and the chest. It's gonna be a really nice one for anything sort of upper body based. All right, so those are the 2 drills, guys. I'll get you to do them 3 or 4 times. Take some time to loosen up. Otherwise, we'll catch you next time. And that's been your MOV+ workout.